Vintage Master set review, red, green, and multicolored, and lands as well, an artifact. So, starting with Aftershock, 2 red red, destroy target artifact, creature, or land, and Aftershock deals 3 damage to you. This is almost all the time gonna kill a creature. I mean, if your opponent is stuck on mana, you could blow up a land. You're taking 3 damage, so this is the kind of card which is not great in a control deck, but I guess you could play it in a control on control matchup. Playing blue-red control against green-black, it's fine. You don't want too many of these cards either, because they do hurt you. I'm giving Aftershock a 5, it's a medium playable. The more aggressive you are, the more you can get away with dealing 3 damage. Sometimes you just need to blow up a big blocker, and Aftershock kills everything. They can be regenerated. It's one thing to note. There are some cards that regenerate in this set. Alright, next card is a role player in this set. This is Beetleback Chief. So this is 2 red red for a 2/2 that creates 2 1/1 goblins. In a goblin deck, this card is just insane because you have a lot of payoffs for the goblins. Either you're gonna give them +1/+1, or they're gonna get haste, or you're gonna can reveal this card of Goblin Ringleader, or Goblin search it up with Goblin Matron. So in a goblin deck, this is an 8 rock solid card. In a non-goblin deck, this is still a fine card. You have the red-white tokens deck with Rise of Initiations. This is the perfect card for that. Basically, the stats are so good that any deck would want this. So this is a 7 in every other red deck. Even the blue-red control decks want to pick this card very high. And it's good with Astral Slide too. So this card just does everything. And pick it very high and always play it. Burning of Sinye, this is like a wildfire. So you destroy 4, each player sacrifices 4 lands, and then this card deals 4 damage to each creature. So this is a symmetrical card. So to abuse this, you want to have either creatures with toughness 5 or greater, or not too many creatures in the deck at all, and you want artifact mana. There isn't too much artifact mana in this set, sadly. So it's very hard to abuse that part of it. I guess you could build a blue-red control deck with a bunch of Killer Whales. Killer Whales is a 3/5, which would survive this card. I'm not very high on this card. I'm going to give it a 4. You have to build around it very hard, and it's hard to build around this card. So I would rather wait to play this card in the Vintage Cube where you have more artifact mana. Alright. Moving on to Burning Wish, 1 and a red. So you may choose a sorcery card you own from outside the game, reveal that card and put it into your hand. So basically you get a sorcery card from your sideboard. I think this card is unplayable. The only way Burning Wish is good is if you have 2 or 3 great sorcery cards you can get from your sideboard, which do versatile different things. Maybe you have like a Chain Lightning, a Burning of Sinye, or something, and then Burning Wish is a toolbox card. But you also have to consider that then you're diluting your deck. You could have just put these cards in your deck, so now you're hoping to draw your 1 Burning Wish to have this flexibility. So I'm giving Burning Wish a 1. I would never play Burning Wish. There's just no reason. You can just put the cards you want to search for in your deck instead, so you have a more tight focused deck, instead of hoping to draw 1 card out of 30. 40. So Burning Wish, not playable. Chain Lightning, however, is very playable. It costs 1 red and it is 3 damage to a creature player. Then that player that creature control and player RR to red mana. If that player does, he or she may copy this spell. Okay, so this loses a little bit of value against other red decks, but most of the time this is just an excellent removal spell. I'm giving Chain Lightning an 8. If you're playing against another red deck, you obviously want to wait until they're tapped out or only have 1 red mana available. Keep this card in mind if you're in a red mirror. If you have no use, if you have 2 mana left, which you're not going to use, make sure to leave 2 red mana up if you're playing against another red deck. It's an important card to have in mind when you play this format, because you want to be able to copy the spell. But yeah, Chain Lightning is a great card in all decks, red decks. I'll even play it in the cycling decks. Chaos Warp, 2 and a red. The owner of target permanent shuffles into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library. If it's a permanent card, he or she puts it on the battlefield. So you have to run the numbers here, and this deals with any permanent, including lands. But what are the odds that your opponent's going to hit a permanent? All lands counts, although if your opponent hits a land, this card is like a 3 mana path to exile, which is a good card, I think. Even though it costs 3 mana. If it's a creature, this ends up not great. I think Chaos Warp is a 6. I would not be too sad to leave this card in the sideboard, but it is a very good tool to deal with anything. But sometimes you're gonna get unlucky and spin your opponent into a good, solid creature. And then they drew a card and didn't have to pay the mana. So this card could backfire, but I still think it's playable. Cartooth Cougar, 5 and a red for 4/4 with can get +1/+0 for 1 red, and it has mountain cycling. So this card is good in the cycling deck. I will give it a 6 because it's fine to hard cast and it's a nice cycler. Outside of the cycling deck, I'm giving it a 5. It's a nice top end finisher. It always replaces a land, but yeah, it's nice to have some sort of finisher. What I don't like about it is that you can only get a mountain. Sometimes you really want a spell. Click Sliffer, 1 red, 3 red mana for 3 for haste. You can sacrifice a goblin to give +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. In a closer mono red goblin deck, this card is very good. It's 7. I don't think it's higher than that because this card is not a goblin itself, which makes it worse. But it hits pretty hard with Beetleback Chief, so it could be a higher rating than 7 if you have a lot of Beetleback Chiefs or other token makers, because those are somewhat expendable. A 3 for haste for 4 is a fine card. So if I'm not playing heavy red, I'm probably not even going to play this card, because if I'm not playing heavy red, I'm probably not playing goblins either. I may have some stray goblins, but yeah. So mostly this is a card for the goblin deck. Okay, Crater Hellion, 4 red for a 6/6 with Echo, 4 red, so you have to pay 6 mana the other turn when it comes into play. And when it ends the battlefield, it is 4 damage to each other creature. This card has Astral Slide written all over it, although you could also play it if you only have the Lightning Rift. This is a card for a control deck. This is not an aggressive card, so I will mostly play this in the cycling deck and the blue-red control decks. Where it is very good, because by the time you reach 6 mana and sweep the board, you can afford to play 6 mana next turn to keep a 6/6 into play. And if you have Astral Slide, this just gets abusive. You're gonna be able to clear your opponent's board multiple times. I'm giving Crater Hellion an 8 if you're in a slower deck, because 6 mana is still a lot, but I think it's bad in an aggressive deck. But you can side it in a mirror deck. Falter, 1 and a red. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. I don't really like this card that much. I prefer the card when it was called Destructive Tampering, because then you could have the ability to blow up an artifact. And that was a somewhat artifact heavy set. This card does only one thing. It does it pretty effectively, but the fact that flyers can block can be pretty annoying. So I'm not in love with Falter. It does have some uses, but if it had cycling, it would be much better. I'm giving Falter a 4. Fire Blast, 4 red, and it is 4 damage to target creature play, but you can also sacrifice 2 mountains. Now this is a card that can kill your opponent out of nowhere. This is a card that often goes to the face later in the game. But it's also a reasonable removal spell. The problem with Fire Blast is that it's very expensive in some ways, whether or not sacrificing mounting or paying the mana, because sacrificing 2 mountains can put you back pretty far. So it's at its best when it's killing the opponent. It's a little less good when you're killing a creature with it, but it can kill some creatures where other cards cannot. So I'm giving Fire Blast a 6. Flametongue Kavoo. Now this is a bomb. This is a 9. It's a 3 and a red for a 4/2 that is 4 damage when it comes to play to a creature. So this is a 2 for 1, and a 4/2 for 4 is not too bad either. Also, this gets completely abusive if you have Astral Slide, where you can blink it. Then it's just completely wrecking the game. This is one of the absolute best targets for an Astral Slide. So this is a first pick. You should almost never pass it first pick. Flowstone Hellion, 4 and a red for a 3/3 with haste, and you can play 0 to give it +1/-1. So if your opponent doesn't have any blocker, you can get in for 5. You can also trade it for 5 toughness creatures, but then you're probably losing the Hellion either. It does punch through some of the walls in the set, like Wall of Diffusion. This is a 5. I don't think it's spectacular. It's pretty expensive, but it hits relatively hard and can be annoying against the more defensive cards in the format. Nice to have some flexibility, but I wouldn't pick it super high. Okay, Gamble, 1 red. Search library for a card, put a card into your hand, discard a card at random, then shuffle your library. I almost never want to play this card. I could maybe see it in a black-red storm deck, but I think I'm giving Gamble a 2. First of all, Demonic Tutors is not that insane in this format. I gave Demonic Tutor a pretty low rating. The fact you have to discard a card at random means that first of all you're down a card, and you may even discard a card that you search for. So if you have a lot of cards in your hand, the chance goes down. This is one of the absolute worst top decks you could ever have. So I would not play Gamble. Giant Strength, 2 red for enchant creature. Enchant creature gets +2/+2. Now, unlike Spinal Graph, I'm not in love with this card. It's super heavy color commitment. I also found that the Goblin decks don't really need this card. The Goblin decks often can swarm the opponent with a bunch of creatures, and I don't really think you need Giant Strength. I'm giving it a 4. And I'm much more excited about the Spinal Graph in the Suicide deck, because that's much easier on the mana. It gives an additional power. So I'm not in love with Giant Strength. Goblin Commando, 4 and a red for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, it's 2 damage to target creature. This is a 5. I'm not in love with this card either. It's very expensive, but it is a nice card to be able to search up later in the game when you have the 5 mana. The fact in the banner is that the body is somewhat weak with a 2/2, but 2 damage still kills with surprising amount of creatures in this format. It's pretty nice in the slide decks because you can start dealing 2 damage, but this is Flametongue Kavoo's a very bad Flametongue Kavoo, but it's still okay. Goblin General. Now this card is a perfect card in the Goblin deck. It's 1 red for 1/1. When it attacks Goblin creature, you control it +1/+1. So it attacks itself as a 2/2. This card is only playable in the Goblin deck because it has to give relevant bonus to be a good. In the Goblin deck is very important. I'm giving it a 7. Outside of a Goblin deck, it's a 2. You could play it, but it's very bad. So the fact of the matter is this is a nice target to tutor up with Goblin Matron. You can sometimes do the trick of playing Goblin Matron, searching Goblin Matron, play Goblin Matron, search Goblin Matron, and then the last card is Goblin General. Then you have a nice swarm to swarm your opponent. Goblin Goon. Now this is a scary card. 3 and a red for a 6/6, and it can't attack unless you control more creatures than the defending player, and it can't block unless you control more creatures than the attacking player. This is another card which is very good in the Goblin deck, because your Goblin deck creates a bunch of tokens. So in this deck it could be an 8 if you have enough token makers. It's also nice to, as I mentioned before, create a Goblin Matron chain. So you want to go Matron into this card, and then you probably have more creatures than your opponent. It can be horrendously bad if you're behind, but in the Goblin deck, it's a very solid card. Goblin Lackey, 1 red for a 1/1. And when it deals damage to a player, you may put a Goblin permanent card from your hand into the battlefield. This card is much better in Constructed, where you have ways to clear out blockers or get a surprise hit. This card loses a lot of value in Limited. If you're playing a super dedicated Goblin deck, I only think it's a 5, because it's only good on turn 1. It can be pretty explosive, but remember, it's hard to get a super good Goblin to put into play. So, not too excited about Goblin Lackey. Goblin Matron, 2 and a red for a 1/1. When it ends the battle, you search it for Goblin card, put that card into your hand. So this is sort of a flexible card. You can get an expensive Goblin if you have the mana. You can also start a Goblin Matron chain. If you have 3 Goblin Matron, you can start searching them each other up, and then you end up with something that is good with a bunch of Goblins in play. So Goblin Matron is important for the Goblin deck. I'm giving it a 6, but it is pretty slow. but you want it in the Goblin deck. Goblin Patrol, 1 red mana for a 2/1 with Echo, 1 red. So if you play this on turn 1, you can't play a 2-drop on turn 2. So maybe you have another Goblin Patrol. I think this card is a 5. It's good, but do hurt you somewhat, and it's pretty fragile. So the Goblin doesn't have to be this aggressive, actually. Alright, moving on to Goblin Pile Driver. 1 red for 1 to protection from blue. When it attacks, it gets +2/+0 for each other attacking Goblin. This is also a card that loses some value in Limited, because this card, if you're not playing against blue, opponent can often block it. But if you can clear the way with some removal spells and goblins, it could be good. It's hard to get both goblins to attack with and removal spells at the same time. So I give Goblin Pile Driver a 6. And it's obviously very good if you're playing as heavy blue deck. Goblin Ringleader. 3 red for a 2/2 haste. When it ends the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all goblin cards in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. Depends on how heavy goblin you are. It's not very good in a non-heavy goblin deck, but if you have like 14 goblins, it's very good. So this ranges between an 8 and a 5, depending on how many goblins you are. If you hit 1 goblin, it's okay. If you hit 2 goblin, it's very good, and then everything else is great. Goblin Settler, 3 red for a 1/1 that comes and play destroy the target land. I'm giving this card a 3. I think it's too expensive. It could be good in some ramp matchups, but sometimes this ability doesn't do anything. And a 1/1 for 4 is just pathetically bad. So I will actually try to stay away from Goblin Settler. I don't think it's particularly good. Goblin Warship, however, is great. 1 red for a 2/2. Goblin spells you can cast cost 1 less to cast, and goblin creatures you control have haste. So this includes itself. So this is a 2/2 with haste at the worst. But it also makes all your goblins better, and it makes the Goblin Command or the card that is 2 damage also much better, because paying 4 for that is much more reasonable. In a goblin deck, Goblin Warship is a 7. The only problem with Goblin Warship is that it doesn't draw any extra card or create any extra goblins. So if your draw is somewhat awkward and you're a little bit flooded, Goblin Warship doesn't help you too much. Hulking Goblin, 1 red for a 2/2, and it can't block. I'm giving this card a 6. I actually think this card is much better than a Patrol, because it doesn't have to occupy 2 mana. If you cast it on turn 2, you don't have to do anything more on turn 3. The stats are fine. I mean, it can't block sucks, but the Goblin deck is oftentimes very aggressive, so the fact that this can't block is not a huge deal. And it is a role player in the Goblin deck. Kaervek's Torch, X and a red. And as long as it's on the stack, spells the target cost 2 more to cast, so that's mostly the counter spells. This X damage target creature pet. So this is a Fireball. I think this card is a 7. It's very good. It can kill blockers early, and sometimes it kills your opponent. And the fact that it costs extra to counter is not super relevant in Limited, but it comes up now and again. Sometimes you're gonna have to wait until they have 3 mana up, then they can't cast counterspell, because counterspell costs 4 mana. So opponent may feel safe leaving counterspell up at 2 mana, but in reality it costs 4 mana. So yeah, Kaervek's Torch, great. Used to be a common, which is fun. Kindle, this is an interesting card. 1 red, and it deals 2 damage to target creature player, but an additional 1 for each Kindle in each graveyard. So this counts for opponent's Kindles as well, by the way. Now this ranges, if you only have 1 Kindle, this is a 5. It's 2 mana for 2 damage. It's okay, but nothing exciting. If you have 2 Kindles in your deck, it goes up to a 6. If you have 3, it probably goes up to a 7, because then you can deal 3 damage somewhat regular. And once you have 4 Kindles, it's still a 7, because it's hard to give the higher rating than that. If you have like 6 or 7, it may go up to an 8. So if you take this, I was more excited to take Kindle in the first pack, where I could get additional copies. A Lightning Dragon, 2 red for flying with Echo 2 RR, and it can pump its power for 1 red. I'm giving this a 7. It's a semi-bomb. It's a really huge blowout if your opponent kills this creature, because then you spend 8 mana total. But it is an aggressive card, and once you've survived the first echo cost, you can kill them very hard. It also blocks very good the turn it comes into play, so even if they get greedy and want to kill it after you pay echo, it's probably gonna make it so they can't attack that turn. So I think Lightning Dragon is a semi-bomb, but I am a little hesitant to paying that much mana. Still gonna play it in all my red decks, but be aware that some of you will get blown out with this card. Lightning Rift. Now this is a role player in the format. This is the sibling to Astral Slide. 1 in red. Whenever a player cycles a card, so again, this triggers off your opponent's cycling. You may pay 1. If you do Lightning Rift, this 2 damage to a creature player. There is a cycle of cycling lands in this set, and sometimes you will get value from your opponent's cycling. But yeah, this is a build around. As I said, this format is somewhat aggressive and dominated by small creatures. So I actually think Lightning Rift is probably a better card than Astral Slide. Although if you have a deck that's completely built around Astral Slide, then Lightning Rift could, Astral Slide could still be better. But Lightning Rift is generally the card I prefer to first pick. If you see this in the first pack and nothing else, I will just slam Lightning Rift and then I can try to draft a sweet deck. The problem with the Lightning Rift deck though is that if you don't draw Lightning Rift, you have a bunch of cyclers. But the good thing about cycling is that it digs you towards the Lightning Rift. So Lightning Rift is hard to give a grade, but I think if you take pack 1, pick 1, it could be an 8. I think if you build around it, Lightning Rift is a very good engine in this format. Orcish Lumberjack, 1 red mana for a 1/1, and you can sacrifice a forest to add 3 mana in a combination of red and green to a mana pool. So this is a mana ramp card, but you do end up running out of forest at some point. And as I said in the start of my review, there isn't too many insane green ramp cards you get, or red for that matter. So I actually don't in love with Orcish Lumberjack. I'm giving it a 4. But it is possible to draft a super dedicated ramp deck if you take every expensive creature you see and a bunch of Orcish Lumberjack. So this is a card deck that I'm staying away from, but it could be good. But you have to build your deck around it, because a 1/1 for 1 is just not gonna cut it most of the time. Alright, moving on to Pillaging Horde. 2 red for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you discard a card at random. So this was one of the most overrated cards of all time when it was called Balduvian Horde. So how good is this card? It's pretty good. Discarding a card at random is sometimes going to discard you a Madness card or something with flashback. It's not going to happen too often, but by turn 4, hopefully have some expendable land in your hand which you can discard. I think Pillaging Horde is a 6. I'm not super excited about it, and remove as well and bounce can be pretty good against it, but it is a pretty hard hitting card. Just be aware that sometimes you will discard a very real card and then the cost is somewhat real. Though an aggressive red deck could maybe get away with playing it. Reckless Charge, 1 red mana. Target creature get +3/+1 gains haste until end of turn. It's a sorcery, which is important to note. It also has flashback 2 and a red. So this is not a combat trick, this is a face burn spell. This is deals damage to the opponent's face. And it's situational because you need to have a card that can get through. So it could potentially deal 6 damage plus some extra haste damage which you may not have gotten otherwise. But sometimes this card's just going to do nothing. I'm giving Reckless Charge a 3. I don't like it at all. I think not only do you need a very aggressive deck, you also need a very perfect circumstance to get this card to work. So I'm mostly going to stay away from Reckless Charge. Alright, now we have one of the most swingy cards in the entire format. Rites of Initiation, 1 red mana. Discard any number of cards at random, which you control the +1/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way. So this is a very expensive, as resources go, mass pump spell. The idea is to cast Rites of Initiation as the last spell you ever cast. Because if you can give your entire team +3/+0 and kill your opponent, it doesn't matter that you lose your entire hand. So this is a card that screams build around. You want this card in a go wide strategy. You want cards like Battle Screech, Beetleback Chief, and a couple of Goblin Matrons. You want to go wide. So yeah, this card in the right deck is an 8. It's one of the most absurd finishes you can get. But it can also be completely unplayable. So in some decks it's going to be a 2 because if you're slow and controlling, you never want to play this card. And don't use this card as a madness outlet. It is just not worth it. Rurik's Bladewing, 3 red, 6/5 flying haste. This card is an 8. It is expensive, which is 6 mana makes it lower than the other cards, but it just hits extremely hard and kills them very fast. And my first ever Vintage Masters draft, I first picked Rurik's Bladewing, and I never looked back. So I have some fond memories of this card. But yeah, it is very good, but keep in mind that it is 6 mana, so there is some go wide Rites of Initiation decks which could actually take Rites of Initiation over Rurik's Bladewing. Next up we have Scourge of the Throne, which is almost a similar card to Rurik's Bladewing. And that is a big flyer that ends again very fast. So it's 4 red for a 5 with flying and dethrone. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So if you're behind on life total, this becomes a 6/6. But it doesn't have haste, unlike Rurik's. When it attacks for the first time each turn, if your opponent has more life, you get an additional combat phase. So it costs Relentless Assault. Then it's almost like the Hellkite Charger from Zendikar. I think this card is worse than Rurik's. I'm still giving it a 6, but because it's a very dangerous card. I almost like this card more in a slide deck than an aggressive deck, because in a slide deck or Lightning Rift deck, you're often going to have lower life than your opponent, and then this attacks for 12 damage by its own, and they may have something else, but this kills the opponent very fast, whereas it's very possible if you're playing an aggressive deck that this is just a 5/5 flyer for 6, which is still fine and playable, but I almost rather want this card a little slower of a deck. Skirk Drill Surgeon, 1 red, 2/1 goblin. When Skirk Drill Surgeon, one other goblin dies, you may pay 2 in a red. If you do, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a goblin permanent card, put it on the battlefield, otherwise put it in your graveyard. So some strange math here. Obviously, the more goblins you have in your deck, the better this card is. Let's say you have 10 goblins in your deck, then you are 25% to hit a goblin. And that's not great. Keep in mind this 2/1 goblin for 2 mana. That's not the end of the world. And it also triggers from your other goblins. So if you're in the later stages of the game, it's possible that you can swarm your opponent, keep this card back, and then maybe get some triggers. And if you have 15 goblins in your deck, then the percentages go up a little bit. Let's see, 15 out of 40. That is, I think, 15 out of 40. That is 37.5%. So the odds go up the more heavy goblins you are, but I'm giving Skirk Drill Sergeant a 5. It's not something that you need to prioritize super high, but it is a nice card. I wouldn't be sad to play it. But keep in mind, the odds that you're gonna hit is not usually never higher than 50%. So if you have something else to do with your mana, you should probably do that instead if the thing is relevant. Skirk Prospector, 1 red for 1/1 goblin. You can sacrifice a goblin to add 1 red to your mana pool. This is a card which I'm not too interested in, but it is pretty nice that you can ramp out some big stuff. But you are paying a cost here. Sacrificing a goblin for 1 mana is a real cost. It gets a little better if you have some expendable goblins to sacrifice, maybe some tokens. But I'm giving Skirk Prospector a 5. It's a fine playable. You can play it in a goblin deck, but I'm not in love with the card. Solar Blast, however, I really like. It's 3 in a red. It is 3 damage to target creature player. So that would probably be good enough already. But it also has cycling 1 red. So you can draw a new card. When you cycle it is 1 damage to target creature player, so it pings. So if you pick up a 1 toughness creature, this is a 2 for 1. And it also is good in the cycling deck, because imagine picking up a 1 toughness creature with this and triggering Lightning Rift, killing 2 creatures and drawing a card. That's some value right there. So I'm giving Solar Blast a 7. I just think this card is very good because it always does something. It can even goes to the face also. Don't forget that if you want to get your opponent low. Spark Spray, 1 red mana. It is 1 damage target creature player and it has cycling for 1 red mana. A nice card in the cycling deck because you can pick up these aggressive early creatures and later in the game it cycles and triggers all your cycles. And it replaces itself to draw a new card. So I think Spark Spray is a 5. It's not something that is super good, but it's a nice card to have. Starstorm, XRR, this X damage to each creature, so it's a sweeper. It's also an instant, which is very good. A sweeper goes because you can sweep the board at the end of the opponent's turn and untap and play your creatures. And also cycling free. So this is a dream card for the cycling deck because they have a sweeper, which is exactly what the deck wants. And if somehow the sweeper isn't good, let's say your opponent playing a control deck, you can cycle it and trigger all the cycling cards and draw a new card. So in the cycling deck, this card is an 8. It's just a super excellent card to have a sweeper with cycling. It's X means that you can kill large creatures with it. You can also make your own creatures survive. So if you have some large creatures, you can cast this for 1 or 2 and kill your opponent's small creatures and make your large creatures survive. In a non-cycling deck, non-controlling deck, I don't think it's particularly good. It's still fine because it has cycling, but there I will give it like a 5. You can play it if you need a 23rd card, but you're almost always going to cycle it and then randomly you can get your opponent by playing a little weird way. But if you're an all-in aggressive deck, that's hard to do. Sulfuric Vortex, 1 red. This is almost like the opposite of Starstorm. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Sulfuric Vortex is 2 damage to that player. And if a player would gain life, that player gains no life instead. There are some life gain spells in this format. There's Armadillo Cloak, there's Teros Faithful, and there's probably some other cards that I'm forgetting about. But this is only good in an aggressive deck, and it's usually only good if you're playing against a little slower deck. If you're playing against another aggressive deck, I would take this card out because it's symmetrical and it hurts you as well. Also pretty good if you see some Armadillo Cloaks, this card could be good. In an aggressive deck, this card is a 6, I think. I'm not actually in love with this card. Another card I don't think is too great is Wall of Diffusion. 1 red for 0/5 with Defender. It can block shadow creatures. Obviously not good in an aggressive deck. And in a defensive deck, the fact that this card doesn't have cycling or any way to kill blocking creatures makes it less good. Just don't like this card. I mean, I could see play it to have them early play. And it does block some of the good shadow creatures, but I'm giving Wall of Diffusion a 5 in a cycling deck, and I would stay away from it in an aggressive deck. Alright, Wheel of Fortune, 2 and a red. Each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. So I could see 2 places for this card. The first is in a Storm deck, where you cast a bunch of rituals, and then you refill your hand. Or you empty your hand of a bunch of Nightscape Familiars, and then you cast this. The only problem in playing this in Storm is that you're often blue-black, so you have to splash this card. And it's not easy to splash in this format. I mean, there are some bad dual lands, but in Storm, I actually think Wheel of Fortune is like 5. I could see play it if you're a little short on playable, so I don't think it's particularly good. Other use for Wheel of Fortune is to play it in a super low curve red Goblin deck, where you play a bunch of Skirk Prospectors, because this is a card that works pretty well with Skirk Prospector. You can throw away cards and add mana, and then you will have the mana to cast your new 7 cards before your opponent. The problem with this card is that your opponent is the one that gets to draw the untap first with 7 new cards. But sometimes your opponent will have a lot of cards in your hand too. So in a super aggressive low curve Goblin deck, I'm giving this card a 7. Worldgurger Dragon. Wow, this card is hard to evaluate. 3 red for a 7/7 with flying and trample. So the stats are top notch, but it's still 6 mana by the way. But when it ends battle, exile all of the permanents you control. That includes lands, so you cannot cast any more spells, and all your other creatures go away. When it leaves the battlefield, return exile cards to the battlefield under the owner's control. I don't like this card. I'm giving it a 3. I think it's most of the time going to be unplayable. I'd much rather have Rorik's Bladewing. There is a combo with Animate Dead, where you get to create infinite mana. So if you want to have some fun and probably not win the draft, you can draft Animate Dead, Worldgurger Dragon, Stroke of Genius. Or Kaervek's Torch, I guess. Probably better with Kaervek's Torch than Stroke of Genius. That if someone can do that, that would be sweet. But I think most of the time, yeah, You get the cards back if this card dies, but if they put some kind of random aura on it, I don't know, like Paralyze, you're just gonna lose, because Paralyze means that you have to pay 4 mana, but you cannot do that because all your lands go away. So Paralyze on World Ogre Dragon is probably the biggest blowout in the history of the game. Well, I don't know about that, but you know what I mean. So yeah, World Ogre Dragon, stay away from it. But if you have Animate Dead and Kaervek's Torch, you almost have to do it because it's just so amazing if you can pull that thing off. Alright, and the trick with Animate Dead is that World Ogre Dragon exiles Animate Dead, which means that Animate Dead comes back and gets to reanimate World Ogre Dragon, which then removes Animate Dead, and then you get infinite mana. If you tap your mana, then you can hopefully cast Kaervek's Torch. Alright, moving on to green now. So, as you can see from red, by the way, it's a heavy goblin component in the deck. It's almost, if you're playing heavy red, you are playing goblins no matter what. You can also, red is also a good support color for white. So you can combine your white cards with Beetleback Chief and stuff like that and go white with Rites of Initiations. Or red has some controlling elements too in the slide deck and the blue-red counterburn deck. Armor of Thorns. Now this is a card which has a lot of text. 1 and a green enchantment aura. You may cast it as though it has flash. But if you do, you have to sacrifice at the beginning of the next cleanup step. Enchant non-black creature. Enchant creature is +2/+2. So this is either an aura that gives +2/+2, or it's a combat trick that gives +2/+2 until end of turn, because the card goes away until end of turn. So that's interesting. I mean, either it's an aura that you can just slap on your 1-drop and go to town. It's pretty good with Deathblade Elite. Turn 1 Deathblade Elite, turn 2 Armor of Thorns, each your opponent's creature. Or it's a combat trick. It's hard for this card to be bad. In most green deck, I'm going to give this card a 5. But in the aura deck, this card goes up to a 6, because that deck wants auras. And if you have a bunch of Deathblade Elites, it also goes up in value. So look out for those cards. Arrogant Worm, 3 green for a 4/4 with trample. It has Madness 2 and a green. So almost all green decks, this card is playable in. If you pay 5 mana for this card, it is fine. It's not spectacular, but a 4/4 trampler for 5 is playable. So in a normal non-Madness green deck, this is a 5. If you're playing a Madness deck, this card obviously goes up in value a lot, because 3 mana for a 4/4 trample flash is insane. So the Dream Curve is cost Wild Mongrel on turn 2 and Arrogant Worm on turn 3. And since both cards are common, that's not too unusual. You can also get card advantage from this card. I mean, if you discard a card to catalog, if you discard a card to Frantic Search, I mean, you're not up a card, but you get to cast this card for free. If you discard this card to Krovikan Sorceress, you're up a card. So in a Madness deck, Arrogant Worm goes up to a 7, and it's a card that you want to pick too high. But I still probably pick the enablers before the payoffs. Basking Rootfall, 1 green mana for a 1/1, and you can play 1 and a green to give it +2/+2 until end of turn. You can only do that once. And it has Madness 0. So this is also an interesting card because it has Madness. So you can sometimes get this card for free. And it's a free, but you have to spend the mana. So it's a card that works very good in a Madness deck, because Madness gives you a cheaper cost often. So then you have the mana left to spend on Basking Rootfall. There are scenarios where Basking Rootfall is not really a card if your opponent can block it effectively. In a Madness deck, I'm giving Basking Rootfall a 6, and in a non-Madness deck, I'm giving it a 5. Berserk, 1 green mana, and you basically double a creature's power until end of turn, and it gives trampled, and bring up the next ends and destroy it. This card is a little too situational for me. It's basically a burn spell, because you can never save the creature, because the creature goes away at the end of turn, unless the creature has regenerate, because then you can actually regenerate the card. It's not sacrifice. You can also use it on your opponent's creature, but then you're taking double damage, so that could be bad, because if you want to kill a big creature, you're going to take a lot of damage, and if you kill a small creature, well, you're using a card to kill a small creature. So it's fine to cast this on your opponent's 2/1 flyer. They take 4 and lose it. And then they destroy it. All in all, I'm not too in love with Berserk and giving it a 4. Next card is Blastoderm. 2 green for a 5/5 with Shroud. And it says Fading Free. So you get to attack with this card 3 times. And you can block with it also the turn it comes into play. And nothing your opponent does can touch it, save from Council's Judgment. Yeah, this card is interesting because if you're not aggressive, you don't want this card because eventually it goes away. But it hits pretty hard and very reliably. So if your opponent kills this in combat because maybe they don't want to take 15 or lose jump block a couple of times, the drawback goes away. So I think Blastoderm is a 6. I'm a little bit conservative about Blastoderm because at the end of the day, it will go away at some point. And this format does not have too many gating cards. I mean, I remember when Blastoderm was in Standard, you can use cards that pick it up and then reset it. But it's hard to reset Blastoderm in this. Brindleshout, 1 green for a 1/1. When it dies, put a 3/3 green board creature token onto the battlefield. This is a weird card because there aren't too many sacrifice outlets in this set. I mean, there are Recurring Nightmare, I guess, but that's rare. I guess the idea is that we can put an Aura on Brindleshout, and if they kill it, it comes back. This is a very defensive card in my mind. It's very good against the Suicide Black decks because it blocks once and then comes back. So if you remember Raptor Hatchling, this is sort of the same card. It's a card that's mostly defensive. So it's a good tool for the green deck to survive against the more aggressive decks. But I wouldn't pick Brindleshout very high in a Madness deck or in a Threshold Madness deck, because that deck usually is a little too aggressive for that. So for a defensive green deck, I'm giving it a 6, and in a regular deck, I'm giving it a 4. Channel is next up, and I think this card is going to be overrated. It's 2 green mana for a card that lets you pay 1 life to add 1 mana to your mana pool. Now there isn't Channel Fireball in this set, but it is Channel Karavek's Torch. So if I had Karavek's Torch, I would play Channel. Otherwise, there isn't too many payoffs for Channel. I'm actually going to give Channel a 3. So unless I'm having Karavek's Torch in my deck, I'm probably going to stay away from Channel. There isn't too much you can do with the mana in this set, and double green is very committing. Also remember that if you want to cast a green card, you need to have 3 green mana, because Channel costs 2 green, and then you need green mana left over to pay for the spell. Alright, Claws of Wirewood, 3 and a green. Claws of Wirewood is 3 damage to each creature with flying in each player. So in similarity to Famine, this also damages play, which is always a little awkward when we're talking about sweepers. But it has cycling too. So this, as I said, is a very important card for the green decks to combat Battle Screech, because it just cleans out the Battle Screech completely. And if there is no Battle Screech in sight, it has cycling. So I would main deck this card. I'm giving it a 6. I actually think that it's a very important card to have for the green decks, because Battle Screech is an incredibly annoying card. And it's not like Battle Screech is the only flyers that this kills. It also kills a bunch of the early flyers that white can play, and it even kills some black flyers too. And the cycling is what ties it all together, because if your opponent doesn't have any flyers, just cycle it away. So yeah, I think this is an important card. I will pick it reasonably high. A card I will also pick incredibly high is the Ranged Hermit. 3 green for a 1/1. Has Echo 3 green, so you're paying 10 mana for a 1/1. Wow, that's sweet. But of course it creates 4 1/1 green squirrel tokens, and squirrels get +1/+1. So this creates 9 power and toughness on the board, because it's not a squirrel itself, but these squirrels get +1/+1, so they are 2/2s. Of course, if your opponent kills this, you're left with 4 1/1, so you have to be a little bit careful if you're playing against red. You don't want to get someone cycling a Solar Blast and killing this card in combat. Be a little careful. However, this card just is an incredibly hard card to deal with. It also creates so many bodies that if your opponent can kill the Hermit, you're still left with the 1/1s. And they can either jump block or attack. Yeah, this card is just amazing. And it's really good in green-black, because you can play the card and then not pay the echo and then get it back with animate dead or reanimate. So it's very good in the green-black decks too, because then you get 8 squirrels, which are 2/2s again. Also, sometimes you can just leave it in play and save animate dead for if they were to kill the hermit. Sometimes if they can't kill the ranged hermit, they just lose. So ranged hermit is an awesome card in all green decks. Pick it high and always play it. I'm giving the ranged hermit a 9. You just can't beat 9 power and toughness for 5 mana, even though you have to pay echo, because you can also abuse the card. In blue, you can bounce it also and get some more squirrels into play. Like Man of War, for example. Alright, Desert Twister, 4 green, destroy target permanent. Now this is expensive. There is basically hard to find a worse card against the token decks, because not only are you probably dead by turn 6 or incredibly far behind, you're usually not killing something incredibly good either way. So I'm giving Desert Twister a 4. I would most of the time not play. Dreampod Druid. Now here we have the first Aura payoff card. So 2/2 for 1 and a green, so it's already a playable card. At the beginning of each upkeep, if Dreampod Druid is enchanted, put a 1/1 green sapling creature token into the battlefield. So you can get 2 1/1s every turn. One in your opponent's turn and one in your turn. One that's going to have Summoning Sickness, don't forget that. But as you can see, there's an aura next to it here, next card, Elephant Guide. So the dream curve is Dreampod Druid into Elephant Guide. And then you're going to have a 5/5 which creates 2 1/1s every turn. Now, here's where a card like Benevolent Ancestor, the white one that protects a card, is good because it protects it from removal. Now, this is a very good thing to do against red because they have very hard time to kill it. They need Aftershock, basically. But their burn spell usually can't kill it. And of course, the fact of the matter is it is a 2/2 for 2 mana, so it can never be that bad. I'm giving Dreampod Druid a 6 in a regular green deck and a 7 in the committed aura deck, especially if you can protect it. Reminds me of Verdant Force, also created a 1/1 every turn, every upkeep. Elephant Guide, 2 and a green, enchant creature gets +3/+3. When it dies, put a 3/3 grand elephant creature token onto the battlefield. Thing to remind is if your opponent kills Elephant Guide in response, you will not get an elephant. So if your opponent is not tapped out, you should be a little bit careful. But in the green-white auras deck, this card is an awesome card. It's a 7 because you can oftentimes protect the creature from a removal spell with the Benevolent Bodyguard, or maybe you have a Shelter or a card like that. And if your opponent eventually kills it, you get a 3/3 back. So some of the risk with the aura goes down. Man of War is, however, a blowout if you play it against this card, because then you will not get an elephant. So in a regular green deck, I'm giving this card a 6. I actually think Elephant Gate is good in all green decks. It just does so much. It gives you a huge bonus and it is resistant to removal. But I could see boarding it out if your opponent has a bunch of Man of Wars. Alright, Elvish Aberration. This is a weird card. 5 and a green for 4/5 that taps for 3 green mana. So it sort of reminds of Kozilek's Channeler from Battle of Zendikar. It's an expensive creature that gives you even more mana. Kozilek's Channeler, however, was good because there was some cards you wanted to ramp into, and 5 mana and 6 mana is a big difference. This card also has Forest Cycling, but I think you usually have better options in green than this card. I like Krosan Tusker as a cycler much better because then you also get to draw a card. We're going to get to Krosan Tusker later, but basically that card also gets you a land, but it also gives you a fresh card. And it has a similar effect. So I actually think that Elvish Aberration is worse than Krosan Tusker. I'm giving Elvish Aberration a 4. It's not a disaster if you play it, but I'm not in love with this card. Alright, Urnam Djinn, 3 and a green, 4/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, target non-wall creature an opponent controls against Forest Walk until your next upkeep. So basically, you're going to have to make one of your opponent's creatures unblockable for 1 turn. Now, this is an efficient card. 4/5 for 4 is good. It has a drawback, but if you're targeting a creature you couldn't block anyway, let's say your opponent has a flyer or a shadow creature, it's not a drawback at all because you couldn't block that creature anyway. It can be bad if you're playing against an opponent which has only good creatures, big creatures in play that you could block. So then it could be bad. But most of the time, this has not a great drawback. It sort of reminds of Surrender Be Free. You give it Earn and Bean a 6. It's a rock solid body, and sometimes the drawback doesn't even exist. But at the end of the day, it does hurt you a little bit. But I'm giving it a 6. Rika, 2 green. Starting with you, each player may put a permanent card from his or her hand into the battlefield. Repeat this process until no one puts a card onto the battlefield. So basically both players empty their hands, put everything in play. I think this card is unplayable. I think it's very hard to make it work because, as I said, there isn't anything insanely good to put into play in this format anyway. And you sometimes just going to get wrecked because your opponent has sandbagged some creatures that they didn't have time to play. So you're going Eureka 2. I could see maybe in one in a blue moon where it's good, but most of the time, no. Fast bonds. We have back-to-back mythics here that are both not great in limited. 1 green mana. You can play any number of lands on each of your turns. Whenever you play a land, if it wasn't the first land you played, it deals 1 damage to you. I don't like this card. It's, first of all, some games there is not going to do anything because you draw it too late or you can't really use the ramp in an effective manner. This a little nice combo with Gush, but yeah, I'm giving Fastbond a 3. I mean, it could be good if you're playing a weird deck which really wants to get on the board fast, but you need to have Fastbond in your opening hand. You need to have lands in your hand. And then, you need to have to be able to use the extra time you get by casting this card. So I wouldn't pick Fastbond very high. I would almost never play it. Fyndhorn Elves is, however, a card I would play in all my green decks. 1 green mana for 1/1 taps for green. It ramps you, and it is a reasonable body. I mean, a 1/1 for 1 is not good, but it's not completely unplayable, and gets you ahead turn faster than you would otherwise. So giving Fyndhorn Elves a 6, playing it in all my green decks. And yeah, you can have too many Fyndhorn Elves, but yeah, I don't know. Always play it. Gaia's Embrace, 2 green for an enchanted creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and has trample and 1 green mana regenerated. So it does have some protection in the sense that it can regenerate. However, some removal spells prevent regeneration, so that's a little unfortunate for this card. But it does give a lot of bonuses. 4 mana is a lot though, and it almost feels like a 5 mana aura because you want to keep 1 green mana up, and then it's also a triple green card in that sense. I'm giving Gaia's Embrace a 4. I don't like this card particularly much. I much prefer Elephant Guide because, as I said, some cards prevent regeneration and then the ability doesn't do anything, and then just getting a free play is enough for me. I think it's better than Trample and Regenerate, and also the fact of the matter this costs double green and 4 mana rather than 3, so I'm not in love with Gaia's Embrace. Genesis. Now this is a sweet card that you used to be able to get with Survival of the Fittest before all the Vengevine insanity was created, when Survival was a value deck. 4 and a green for a 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you can pay 2 and a green. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which could be Genesis, by the way. So this is a 4/4 for 5. That's already okay. It's not great, but not unplayable. And if your opponent ever kills it, you're going to have an engine in your graveyard. You're going to be able to get back a creature every turn. And if Genesis is the only card in your graveyard, you can just get Genesis back. So, yeah, this card has value all over it. It's not going to be great if your opponent has a bunch of flyers, and then you tap out on turn 5 and cost Genesis. They're going to breathe a sigh of relief. But in most decks, it's just going to be great. It's a 4/4 that sometimes, if you have a stocked graveyard, you can just send Genesis into its doom, and then you have this engine card in your graveyard that gets it back. I mean, what are they going to do? Take 4 damage every turn? They can't really do that. I'm giving Genesis a 7. What prevents it from being higher is that your opponent can sometimes ignore it and swarm you with flyers. But it's pretty good against goblins too, because the body is good and they don't really want to kill it. Giant Mantis, 3 and a green for a 2/4 with reach. We've seen this card a lot. It's a giant spider basically. It's good against the white decks, but it's not great otherwise. So I'm giving Giant Mantis a 5. It's not a disaster if you play it, but it goes up in value if you play against the white decks because they can have a hard time with it, actually. So, Giant Mantis gets a 5. Gigapede, 3 green for a 6/1 with Shroud, so there's not going to be any Solar Blast cycling or Spark spraying of this card. At the beginning of your upkeep, Gigapede is in your graveyard, you may discard a card. If you do, return it to your hand. This is a weird card. It trades with everything, but then it comes back, but you have to discard a card. Oftentimes you're going to have lands to discard, or maybe madness spells. So this is a very swingy card. In some games, when your opponent has a bunch of tokens, it's not going to do almost anything. It's going to kill some tokens, then you have to discard a card with 5 mana. And your opponent's going to be pretty happy. But if you're playing against a slower deck, they have to trade a real card for it every time, because they can't target it with spells or abilities, except if they have Council's Judgment. So in some matchups, it's going to be very good, and in some matchups, it's going to be bad. So it's very hard to give Gigapede a rating. If you're playing as go wide, small token decks, I think it's a 3. I think it's really bad. But if you're playing as another control deck, they can't kill it, and they have to trade a real card for it, and it just comes back. Then it can be a 7. So it's a very swingy card, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually a wise decision to leave Gigapede in your sideboard. So now we have a card that is incredibly good, and you should pick it incredibly high, and that is Grisly Fate. 3 green, and you get to put 2/2/2 green bear creature tokens onto the battlefield. Now, already this card is fine. It creates 2 bodies. It reminds me of Moan of the Unhallowed and Nightwatch. Those cards were fine. I mean, Moan of the Unhallowed had a flashback too. This costs 1 mana more, but okay, we have some more things going on here. You also have Threshold. You can put 4 bears into play if you have Threshold. So then we're talking. Then you get 8 power and toughness for 5 mana. So if you can ever cast this card with Threshold, you're in very good business. It's going to be very hard for your opponent to come back from that. And remember, green has Wild Mongrel at common. If you're playing blue-green, you have Aquamoeba. So you can dump excess lands. You can sometimes even afford to dump a spell to get 2 additional bears. And then it also has Flashback for 7 mana. Now remember, if you cast this on Flashback, it's leaving the graveyard. So if you have 7 cards in your graveyard, including Grisly Fate, it will not give you the 4/2/2s. You not have Threshold. So you need 8 cards, including Grisly Fate. But that's obviously just gravy. One thing that Grisly Fate does, if you're not playing as a very heavy flyers deck, is that it buys you time to cast the Threshold. So the card itself helps you get to Threshold or Flashback. So that's another great card. So I'm giving Grisly Fate an 8. I think it's a super good card in all green decks, especially in the Madness decks. So pick Grisly Fate very high. It is very good. Alright, moving on. Now here we have a banned card. It's banned in Legacy. Hermit Druid. 1 green for a 1/1. So it's green and tap it. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you can reveal a basic land. Put that card into your hand and the rest of the cards in your graveyard. So I think they made a mistake when they designed that card. They should have made the cards shuffle in or get exiled. Then it would just be a random card that gives you lands like that Weathered Wayfarer. But the fact that the cards are put into your graveyard is unfortunate, to say the least. Now this is not going to be a broken card in Limited, because you're not going to be able to dump cards in your graveyard reliably. I mean, in Constructor you can build a deck with almost no lands and then mill your entire deck. But you can't do that in Limited. So this is a value card. It digs you a card. It digs you towards Threshold by dumping spells, and then it gives you land. So in a Threshold Madness deck, I think Hermit Druid is a 6. It's never going to be insane, but it's going to be a role player. It gets you lands, gets you closer to Threshold. Sometimes it's not going to do anything though, because also remember that you're dumping spells in your graveyard, not lands. So you will have a lower density of lands in your deck. If you could also maybe play it in a Reanimator deck, but it's very unreliable to get the cards. So I'm not super in love with Hermit Druid, but it has a place. Jungle Bomb. Now here's a big boy. 3 and green for 5/5. Whenever it becomes blocked, it gets -1/1 until end of turn for each creature blocking it beyond the first. So if they double block it, it's a 4/4. If they triple block, it's a 3/3. So this card could be bad if your opponent had a bunch of blockers in play, but then your opponent's not attacking you, so that's good. It's bad in big board stalls. It's very good if it's the only creature standing. I think this card is really good in the green-black decks where you can clear your opponent's creatures away with removal spells. Also good in the green-red decks where you can Spark Spray and Solar Blast kindle your creatures away, and then it's a 5/5. So if you can back up Jungle Bomb with removal, it's a 6. If you don't have too many removal spells in your deck, it shrinks down to a 5. But it's a fine card. You have to remember that 5/5 for 5 is not what we used to get back in the time. Nowadays we get it without working for it. Colossopede is a card, but this was before power creep. Alright, Krosan Tusker, 5 green for a 6/5. So that's an okay card. As I said, crits were worse back then, but this is also a 7-drop. But it has Cycling 2 and a green. And when you cycle it, you get a basic land from your library, and then you also get to draw a card from the cycling. So it is a 2-for-1, but one of the cards is a land, and it costs 3 mana. And you can hard cost it if you get cycling. I prefer that, as I said, to the Elvish Aberration, because it is much better to cycle. And it's probably even better to hard cost anyway, because 6/5 is much better than 4/5. You usually can't use the mana. That being said, I only think Krosan Tusker is a 5. It's none of the things that Krosan Tusker does is so particularly good. It's an expensive card to cast, and the ability to cycle is somewhat dirty, so I wouldn't overrate it, but it's a fine playable. I'm not even sure I like it too much in the Madness decks, it's too slow. Krosan Marine, 3 and a green for a 3/2. It has Provoke, so you can force a creature opponent controls to block it. You untap it too. It can't be blocked by more than one creature. So this is a great target for an aura, because you can then force something small and eat it up. They can't double block it. So it's like the Deathblade Elite, you have some protection. This card can be very swingy. Sometimes not going to do anything because you don't have any profitable cards to eat up. But it's decent against the token decks, because against Battle Screech you can just force your opponent to block with a 1/1 flyer every turn. So it does have some value. I'm giving Krosan Marine a 6. I think that it is sort of a green removal spell in a sense, but it's slow and sometimes you can actually take over the game. If you're playing a Goblin deck, you can eat their 1/1s every turn, and eventually you can then trade for a real card by forcing it to block. So I like Krosan Marine. It's even better if you have some removal spells. Nature's Law, 1 and a green. First, you go for a forest card, put a card onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. So it does not come into play tapped. This is a ram spell that doesn't fix you because you only get forests. And I mean, I guess you can open a duel. That's kind of sweet. So get a tropical island. But it ramps you, and it also, if you can use the mana at the same turn, it only costs 1 mana. But this is not really the format for ramp spells. I think it's fine if you have Grisly Fate, because then you want to get to 5 mana, and this is 1 card in your graveyard later for Threshold. So I'm giving Nature's Lore a 5. I'm not super excited about it. Norwood Priestess, 2 green for a 1/1. And tap, you may put a green creature cost from your hand onto the battlefield. Activate it only during your turn before attacks are declared. Mediocre card, I don't like it. I'm giving it a 3. You need to have something huge, and it has to be green, so you can't cheat in a big red dragon. And so it basically adds mana, but this also costs 4 mana. So most of the time you will be able to play the cards anyway. So I'm giving it a 3. I could see playing it in a green deck with some huge creatures. Moving on to Nostalgic Dreams. 2 green, 2 green mana. As an additional cost to cast Nostalgic Dreams, stop X cards. Return X sword cards from your graveyard to your hand, exile Nostalgic Dreams. So this is a card that screams late game. You want to get to the late game, and then you can get back a bunch of cards. But you're always going to be down a card because you have to discard the cards to get them back. Now you could discard lands or madness spells, but yeah, I think this is normally going to be too clunky. I'm giving it a 4. I could see play it if you're playing in a grinding matchup. Oath of Druids, 1 and a green. At the beginning of each play's upkeep, that player chooses target player who controls more creature than he or she does and it's his or her opponent. And then you reveal cards until you hit a creature and put that into play. So basically, if you have less creatures than your opponent, you can get a creature into play. Now this is a 4, I think. In most decks it's going to be unplayable, but I could see running some sweet green deck with very few creatures, and then most of the time your opponent's just going to cast a creature. This isn't vintage, people aren't going to play around Oath of Druids, so it is a heavy build around card, and most decks not going to want it. Penumbra Wurm, 5 green for a 6/6 with trample. When it dies, put a 6/6 black worm creature token with trample onto the battlefield. So this is a good reanimator target. It's a little too expensive to cast, but you could do it, but it's very expensive. But it has very resistance. Once you get into play, it's hard for your opponent to deal with it in a good manner. I mean, Swords to Plowshares, Council's Judgments, cards like that work. I mean, also watch out for Exile. There is a card called Exile in the white, which exiles a attacking creature. So be a little bit aware of that. Penumbra Wurm, I'm giving it a 5. And if you're playing the Reanimator deck, it goes up to a 6. Alright, so here we have some potential card advantage. 1 and a green, Provoke. Untap target creature don't control. That creature blocks this turn if able, draw a card. So this is a situational removal spell. Almost feels like a fight spells. Now, the difference about fight is that you cannot use, for example, your flyer. So if you have a flyer, you cannot provoke your opponent's ground creature. If you have a shadow creature, you can't provoke your opponent's creatures without shadow. But most of the time this is going to function as a fight spell. But it's going to have to be in combat too, so your opponent can have a card like Exile to mess this up. So it feels like a fight spell, but yeah, it's not really. And you get to draw a card if it resolves, so but it has 2 targets, so it's going to resolve most of the time. I'm giving Provoke a 6. I think it's a nice tool to have. But yeah, another thing also is that your creature cannot be summoning sick. So if you cast a creature this turn, you can't use it to provoke because your creature cannot attack. And also sometimes your opponent can mess with a Banalish Trapper to tap the creature that we're going to block or attack. So it is a fight spell, but it has a bit ifs and buts, and it doesn't give any bonuses as far as power and toughness goes. So I'm giving Provoke a 6. It can be a nice 2 for 1 sometimes, but you have to work for it. Realm Seekers, 4 green for a 0/0, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. X is the total number of cards in all players' hands. And you can pay 2 and a green, remove a counter, search a liver for land, put it into your hand. So it can be any land, but in limited, we're mostly going to play with basic lands. I don't like this card. Problem is that by the time you get to 6 mana, most players are not going to have too many cards in your hand. So what's this going to be on average? Like a 4/4. And the ability is not great either, because this is not Commander or where you can get Stripmine or some sweet utility land. You're mostly going to just thin out your deck, and you have to shrink it. So I'm giving Realm Seekers a 3. I would stay away from it most of the time. Regrowth, 1 and a green. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty simple design. It's cheap. It's okay. We had this card in some limited formats. It was called Treasured Find in Return to Ravnica, and there's also okay. This is easier to cast, but yeah, it gets the best card back from your graveyard, but you still have to cast the card. It has to end up in your graveyard before. So I'm giving Regrowth a 5. I would probably play it in a green deck, but I'm not too excited about it. It goes up in value for playing green-black with a bunch of removal spell, because getting back a Expunge is nice. Roar of the Worm. This is a very good card. 6 and a green. Put a 6/6 green worm creature token into the battlefield. It has flashback 3 and a green. So the idea is that you discard this card to some card like Wild Mongrel, and then you have a 6/6 for 4 mana. Now it is going to be weak against bounce. And sometimes you just draw this later in the game when you have 7 mana, and then you cast it, and then you flash it back. And it's very hard to lose from there. So in a Madness deck, this card is a 7. In a non-Madness deck, I think it's a 5, between a 5 and a 6, because it is still pretty expensive. Probably I'm going to give it a 5. But even the non-Madness decks sometimes end up with Wild Mongrel, because that card is just efficient enough anyway. So yeah, if you have Wild Mongrel and Roar of a Worm in your starting hand and 4 mana, you're going to be in very good shape. Because a 6/6 for 4, well, let's hope your opponent doesn't have Mana War, I guess. Rofellos, double green, 2/1. This card adds a green mana to your mana pool for each forest you control. So it's pretty broken, but I would want to be heavy green, because it's hard to cast this on turn 2 if you're not heavy green, and you're not going to get as much mana. So if you're heavy green, this card is an 8. It's really insane. This is the card you want. Because a 2/1 for 2 is also not bad in this format. It still trades with a lot of things. So even if you can't use the mana, it's still going to be a real body in it. But this is going to go do some broken stuff. It shrinks down pretty fast if you're not heavy green. If you're playing like green as a lighter card, I'm only going to give it a 5. Alright, so now hold your hat, because this card is confusing. Sapling Burst, 4 and green, fading 7. So it's going to stay into play for 7 turns. Remove a fade counter to Sapling Burst. Put a green sapling token into the battlefield. It has this creature power toughness equal to the number of fade counters on Sapling Burst. And when it leaves the battlefield, destroy all tokens. But at that time it had no fading counters anyway, so they were probably dead anyway. But if you were able to boost them somehow, they would still die. Okay, so try to break this down. If you remove 1 fade counter, you will have a 6/6 that shrinks down to a 5 first time it attacks. How would we feel about a 5/5 for 5 mana that shrinks every turn? It's fine, it's not great, but it would probably be okay, because your opponent probably will ignore it forever. If you remove 2 fade counters, you have 2 5/5s. It's going to shrink down to a 4/4. Now this is much better. If you can pay 5 mana for 2 4/4s, I mean they're going to be 4/4s the time they attack. If you can remove 2 counters for 2 5/5s that shrinks every turn, that's a good card. That's a card you will always play, because they're going to hit very hard. They're going to hit for 8, then they're going to hit for 6, and then they're going to hit for 4, and your opponent at that time almost have to block them. So I would almost never remove just 1 counter. I would probably remove 2 counters most of the time. If I remove 3 counters, I have 3 4/4s that's going to be shrinking down every turn. So the first time I attack for 9, then they attack for 6, then they attack for 3. So I think the sweet spot with Sapling Burst is to make 2 creatures. I think that's the best. So then you're attacking with 2 4/4s, and that's only a little worse than 3 3/3s. They attack for 8 rather than 9. They're also harder to block. But the next turn you will instead have 2 3/3s, whereas in the other hand you have 3 2/2s. You're already equal there. So I will most of the time remove 2 counters from Sapling Burst. I think the card is very good. I think it's an 8. I will pick it very high. But it is a confusing card, and I was happy to be able to break it down here, because I learned myself what the card does a little bit here. Alright, Sylva's Rogue Elemental. 3 green for an 8/5. And it has Trample. And you can redeem it for 1 green mana. This is an insane card. It hits extremely hard, 8 power Trample. And your opponent can't even destroy it most of the time. Expunge is one of the better answers. Of course, there's also Swords of Plowshares. And Exile too. But yeah, this is one of the best cards to ramp into. I'm giving it an 8. Incredibly good card. Simian Grounds. Now this is a hard card to evaluate. 2 and a green for a 3/4 with flash, and it has Echo 2 and a green. This is going to be able to ambush your opponent sometimes. So people who don't know this format are going to walk into this card, and it's going to be great. You're overpaying a little bit for 6 mana total for a 3/4, but of course it's split up over 2 turns. But it's hard for you to do anything productive the turn after you cast Simian Grounds, because you have to pay 3 mana. I think Simian Grounds is a 6, just because I don't think people are going to know the format. If you play against people who know the format, it's going to shrink down to a 5 because they're not going to get ambushed so easily. Okay, sudden strength, 3 and a green. Target creature get +3/+3 until end of turn, draw a card. So yeah, this could be a 2 for 1, but it is pretty expensive and slow and clunky. So I'm giving this card a 5. It's not a disaster if you play it, but just remember it's also somewhat telegraphed because 4 mana is a lot, especially if you play it on defense. So I think it's fine to play 1, but I wouldn't be too excited about it. I mean, sometimes you're going to get the 2 for 1, it's going to feel great. Sometimes you're never even going to be in a position to use it because you're either getting attacked very hard and you can't afford to leave the mana up, or your opponent's going to play around it or throw something expendable. So not so excited about sudden strength. Another card that I'm not super excited about is Survival of the Fittest. 1 and a green. Green, discard a creature card, search a for a creature card, reveal a card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. I mean, if you have Living Death or Recurring Nightmare, I would just slam this card and go black-green. It's also pretty nice with Reanimate or Recurring Nightmare. But if you're not green-black, the card doesn't do that much. I mean, you're down a card, but it lets you turn your Llanowar Elves into your large creature later in the game, or if you're stuck on mana in the early game, you can search up your Llanowar Elves with your expensive creatures. But if I'm green-black and have a Reanimator team, I think Giving Survival feels a 7. If I'm playing a regular green deck, I'm giving it a 5. I don't think it's actually that good. You're down a card, and sometimes it's not going to do anything because you're not really upgrading your creatures sometimes. So don't overrate Survival of the Fittest. But if I see it pack one, pick one, I may take it and try to build a sweet green-black deck. Sylvan Library, 1 and a green. Now this is a very confusing card, but basically you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library in your draw step instead of just drawing a card. And you can pay 4 life to keep additional cards. You can do this twice then, so you can pay 8 life to draw the 2 cards. Otherwise you can rearrange the cards. Now this is a good card, but it is not that as good as in Cube, because the cards you're drawing is not going to be as good as they are in Cube. And it's harder to pay life in this set because this is a pretty aggressive limited set. If you play this card against a control deck, you can just draw a bunch of extra cards. You can even pay 16 life or 12 life. The rearranging is nice, but if you don't have a way to shuffle your library, you're going to eventually have to draw those cards anyway. So I'm giving Sylvan Library a 7. I think it's a good tool to have, but it's not a bomb, and it's not as good in this format as it is in Cube or in 5th edition draft. There's probably a complete Stone Cold bomb. Symbiotic Worm. So this is a card similar to Penumbra Worm. 5 green, 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 7/7. When it dies, put 7/1/1 green insect creature tokens into the battlefield. It's an uncommon as well as the Penumbra Worm. So this is another good reanimate target that you almost never want to hard cast. You can even play this in a blue-black reanimator deck without being able to cast it. So that deck is one of the better reanimate targets, because I rather get 7/1/1s than a 6/6 trampler, especially if I'm playing this blue. I'm playing as blue-black, maybe they expunge my Penumbrum, then Manowar my token. Whereas 7/1/1s is much more annoying to deal with. So in a reanimator deck, I'm giving this card a 7. In a regular green deck, I'm giving it a 3. You need to have a lot of mana ramp to cast this card. I will probably not play. Tangle. This is a sideboard card against the Rites of Initiation. 1 and a green. Prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Each attacking creature doesn't untap during its controller's next unstep. This is one of the better fogs they ever printed, because you froze down your opponent's team 2 turns in a row. They deal no damage and they don't untap next turn. This card could be a complete blowout, but it's still at the end of the day just a fog. If you're on defensive, the card doesn't do anything. If your opponent's only attacking you with 1 creature, this card also doesn't do very much. It just prevents you from dying. It is an insane blowout against Rites of Initiations, though. And it could be a good tool to survive against the go wide strategies. I would put this card in my sideboard. I would never main deck this card. But it is a good tool against aggressive decks. If I see Rites of Initiation, this card comes in for sure. It's hard to give it a grade. Here's where my grading system kind of breaks down because it's just a sideboard card. Now, speaking of sideboard card, Tribute to the Wild. 1 and a green, instant. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact or enchantment. So, funny thing is that if they have several artifacts or enchantments to play, they get to keep their best enchantment or artifact. Or if they have an artifact or an enchantment, you're never going to get rid of what you want. Not only is this a situational disenchant, it's not always good to have a disenchant in this set. So this is a bad sideboard card. I would almost not even bring it in. I'm giving it a 3. Wild Mongrel. Now this is a huge card in this set. 1 and a green for a 2/2. Discard a card. Wild Mongrel gets +1/+1 and becomes a color of your choice until end of turn. So this card works with Madness, it works with Threshold, it works with Reanimator. All decks wants this card. This is like the Frantic Search of green. Wild Mongrel is a 7, but it's pretty precariously close to an 8 actually. It just does everything. The Reanimator deck wants it, the Madness deck wants it, and the Aura decks probably also wants it just because it's an efficient vehicle. Now the changing of colors is good, because if your opponent casts Expunge on Wild Mongrel, you can just change it to black and the spell fizzles. If your opponent casts Exile on Wild Mongrel, you can turn it into white. So it also, the color changing ability is very useful. So don't sleep on that either. So Wild Mongrel is a super high pick. Yavimaya Elder, also known as the Green Ancestral, was back in the day. 1 green for a 2/1. When it dies, you may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them and put them into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. You pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. Now back in the day, you damage used to stack, and then this card was better, but it's still fine. So you can see that the 5 mana spell that gives you 2 lands and a card, and you can get a block out of it. And you can also split up the mana costs. Or you can block with this, trade with your opponent's creature and get 2 lands, and then you got a 3-for-1 if the lands are useful. It also fills up your graveyard. Yeah, this card is sweet. It's not insane. I'm giving it a 6, but it's a rock solid playable. There are some matchups where this card is kind of awkward, like if your opponent has a bunch of flyers, this could be a little too clunky and too slow. But it's a solid card. I will almost put it in my green decks. And it's very annoying for the red-black suicide deck to play against this, because you're going to be able to trade for a creature and then get 2 lands. Alright, so that was green. This turned out to be a little longer than I anticipated, so I'm going to do multicolored artifacts and lands in a separate segment. So you will have to watch that too if you want my review of those cards.